So the lights go out in your house and you're not quite sure what happened. It could be routine maintenance from the utility company. It could be some Yahoo plowed through an intersection and hit a transformer, causing the power to be out for, a few hours to a day or so. It could be storms rolling through your area, something that is smaller or something larger like a hurricane, something that's going to last a few days. Or it could be, something really big. We think about the EMPs and things like that that would cause a complete grid down situation. Today, I want to talk about how much power do we actually need in these different situations. We watch these videos all the time that say you need one of these, you need a couple of these, go ahead and grab a couple of these. But today, I want to break down sort of why we need those. The amount of power we're going to need in some sort of just regular power outage that is an inconvenience to something that is larger and longer term, and some of the things we're going to need to sustain ourselves through that. So with that, let's go ahead and get into, a day to 3 days. This is your typical basic power outage, not a huge deal, as long as we know that there is, or we can figure out that there is an end in sight. This situation is more about inconvenience and boredom than anything else. And honestly, when it comes to how much power do you need to survive a situation like this, it's probably zero, because you may not like it, but you're not going to need these things to survive a few days. You can survive just fine without anything. You do want to, however, go through the situation like this and maintain as much sanity as possible, and that's what this is all about. So with the power being out, you're talking about the internet also being out. Cell phones may or may not. It really depends on what happened in the situation. Are these cell phone towers affected? If they're not, you may still have a little bit of internet. You could use your phone to get online. You could use your phone to tether to your laptop. So you would be able to get information if the phones are still working. So phones are going to be one of those things you probably want to keep charged up. You've also got laptops and tablets. If you're, going to be watching movies, you can get some DVDs and a little DVD player and watch movies on your laptop. You've got tablets and Kindle readers and things like that. You can put books on and maybe even a couple, downloaded videos and things like that to keep people entertained as well as educated a little bit. You've got your basic devices that take batteries like the AA's, AAA's, C's and D's. You've got your flashlights, your lanterns, your radios, all of the, even, remote controls, all of the different things around the house that take these batteries. You're going to want to have some extras for those as well. And then you've got your light sources. You've got your typical LED lights that use about 15 watts. Even some of the smaller flashlights use even less than that. You've got flashlights that take the batteries. You've got flashlights that are rechargeable with whether that's USB-C or micro USB. And then you've got the light that takes AC power, which will give you a little bit more light than one of these smaller flashlights, but they do take up more energy. And as far as heating and cooling, you also got to think about fans. You've got USB fans. You've got the larger box fans are going to take about 60 watts per hour. So that's going to take a lot of energy. So you might want to think smaller with a situation like this. You've got fans that have rechargeable batteries. I've got one that's got a couple of batteries, and I can use one on that fan and use one to charge sort of like a mini power bank. So there are some options for that. As far as heating, the best option I think is the buddy heater. This takes 1 pound canisters of propane, and it'll last about 5 hours on low. So with a couple of these canisters, you can heat up a small room at night and not have to worry about freezing to death. And then you've got refrigeration. And in a situation like this, maybe just don't open the refrigerator all that much, as little as possible, and you maintain that temperature in there. And if it's something that does last a day or two, you can always just get an extension cord and plug an inverter into your car and plug that refrigerator into that. Run that for about a half an hour, a couple times a day, just to maintain that temperature. So those are the main things you're probably going to need power for in a short-term situation like this. But how much energy do you actually need? And that's what I want to go into next. First off, you have the batteries, the regular batteries. And I think it's important to have 3 sets of batteries for every single device that you have. So you need to have backups for your backups, plus the ones that are in that device themselves, just to be on the safe side of everything. And then also you've got these laptops and cell phones and tablets and Kindle readers that I said were important. You also want to make sure and have a couple of little power packs to be able to recharge those. The 10,000 milliamp hour, I would say, is the minimum size you'd want, and maybe even a couple per cell phone in your house. So if you have 4 cell phones in your house, maybe you want to get 6 or 7 of these, even 8 of these, just to be on the safe side. And then I would say you'd want a little bit of AC power, because you never know when you're going to need to be able to recharge something, and it's going to take, you're going to have to actually plug it in. It doesn't take a USB. One of these micro power stations that are between 250 and 500 watt hours that are relatively inexpensive, these will get the job done in a situation like this. You're not going to be able to power the coffee maker. You're not going to be able to power a hot plate or anything like that. But this is a short-term situation, and you probably don't want to anyway. This is one of those things that will give you that option. Although it is a small option, it will give you that option to get a little bit of AC power. And then as far as the buddy heater, like I said, you can get 2 of those canisters will get you through a night. So maybe you want 6 or 8 of these canisters just to be on the safe side. If something goes on for a couple days, you're going to have that propane. And if you've got to keep that room heated up 24 hours a day, maybe you want even a little bit more than that 8 to 10. Maybe you want a dozen of those just in case. And then for refrigeration, like I mentioned, you get a 1,000-watt inverter, you hook that up to the battery, and then you get an extension cord and run it to your refrigerator. And you can make sure you start your vehicle so you don't kill your battery, but you can run your vehicle 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just to bring that refrigerator back down to temperature a couple times a day and maintain that. And your food's probably going to be fine for a couple of days. So for a day or two, you can see it's pretty basic and pretty easy to prepare for situations like this. Over time, you can get a little battery pack here, extra batteries every time you go to the store. It's pretty easy to prepare for a situation like this. And if you forget something, it's not going to be the end of the world, because the power is going to be on eventually. It's when you get into situations that are longer lasting, around a week or more, and situations where you're not quite sure if the power is going to be on, if it's going to come back on or not, or when that is going to be. And that's the next one I want to talk about. This is really the heart of preparedness. This is the timeline that most of us think about when we talk about preparedness and what we try to prepare for. The people on the outside that don't know anything about preparedness probably think we're all preparing for doomsday, the zombie apocalypse, or, something major to happen, the bombs to start dropping. That's not necessarily the case. Most of what we do and most of what we prepare for falls into this category right here. So for these longer power outages, we need to expand on everything that we've gotten for these shorter term ones. Everything that we've gotten for these short-term power outages are also going to be important for this one. This is just where we expand on that. And with your basic batteries, you need to have more of a stock of your basic batteries. So this is where stockpiling comes in, where every time you go to the store, you get a few more and make sure you're rotating through those. And pretty soon you'll have 50 to 100 backups of your batteries, which will last far longer than just a few day power outage. It's going to last, a few weeks. Along with those, you need to have the rechargeable batteries. And rechargeable batteries are not only great for preparedness because you can use them multiple times, they're also cheaper than the normal batteries, the regular disposable batteries, because you can use them multiple times. So make sure you have quite a few of these as well. I have a bunch of Eneloop batteries that are really good rechargeable batteries. And then I've been testing out some other ones, the Amazon Basics and things like that. Test these out now while you can. And then in a critical situation, you'll know which ones are going to work and which ones are not going to work so well. So with the batteries, it's just bumping it up a little bit and having the rechargeables. And along with the rechargeables, you also have to have the charger to be able to recharge those batteries and the energy to put into those batteries. So that may mean solar panels. That may mean, larger power banks and things like that. but we need to be able to recharge those batteries for these smaller devices. And then as far as light, in the shorter term power outage situations, you've got the candles and the headlamps and things like that. In this situation, you may want to think about some of the solar yard lights that you can stick out in the front yard and will replenish during the day. You can bring them inside. You've got oil lanterns that you can use. In a situation like this, you may not be wanting to light up your entire house like a Christmas tree, because if you have light and your neighbors don't, you're just a big target right then. So maybe you want to think about how much light, and these little yard lights that don't give off a whole lot of light may be good in situations like that. And also because this could become a dangerous situation very quickly as far as how people react and what people are doing, you've also got to think about your communications and your security. Communications, you've got ham radio, which has got a little bit of a learning curve, and you need the right equipment to be able to get out, further than line of sight. But you also have the FRS and the GMRS radios, the ones that you can get on Amazon or Walmart that don't require a license, and it's basically line of sight, around a mile, half a mile. So you could talk to your neighbors, you could set up surveillance, you can talk to your family if they're out and about and things like that. And again, if the cell phones are working, that might be an option, but who knows how long that works. Also, on a side note, T-Mobile and Starlink are working at putting something together, which is basically a satellite phone, which is going to be a game changer as far as preparedness is concerned, where if the T-Mobile phone service is out, say the towers are out, it will automatically connect to those Starlink satellites and make it right now they can do texting, but it'll make it a satellite phone, which is pretty cool. But you've got to think about these different things as far as communication goes, because your options are going to be limited. So you've got to be able to figure out what you're going to be able to use. Even the crank radios, a lot of the ham radios and FRS will have the NOAA stations, but crank radios are good as well. And then as far as security, you've got motion lights and motion detectors and even cameras. A lot of the cameras that we have these days are all connected to Wi-Fi and are going to be basically useless in a situation like this. I've got a few that I know are just going to be sort of pointless. But I also have a couple. I've got a really old school Bunker Hill, really cheap little setup that takes very little power, and it's something that it's all in-house, so I don't have to worry about Wi-Fi or anything like that. I've got a monitor where I can see, it's got night vision, and I can see what's going on outside. And at the very least, it may be pretty low tech, but at the very least, if I've got this camera out there and I've got a motion sensor that alerts me that there's movement out there, and then I can look at that camera, as well as a light sensor to lighten that area up, that'll give me a little bit of extra warning in a situation where I'm not trusting people all that much. So communications and security, I think in a situation like this, you're going to need a little bit more energy than you would in the initial just regular blackout, because these are going to be really important. And as far as refrigeration, you are going to have to worry about either you're going to have to go with foods that don't require refrigeration, or you are going to have to worry about getting some refrigeration. Now, running your large refrigerator, it takes about 1.5 kilowatts on average per day, which is a whole lot. That's 1,500 watt hours per day that it's going to take to run a full-size refrigerator. That's far more than you want to do, trust me. One of the best options, I think, is a DC refrigerator. I recently did a review on the Iceco APL 55, which is a huge DC refrigerator as far as DC refrigerators go, and Iceco is one of the top of the line brands. The CCOP compressor in these is really efficient, so these take about 250 to 300 watt hours per day to run, so really efficient. This has got a lot of space in there, and you can even get smaller DC refrigerators that would take up less energy than this. Like I said, I recently did a video on this Iceco if you want to check that out. But I think a DC refrigerator is probably the best option. You're not going to be able to put everything that you have in your refrigerator in there, but you're going to be able to get the important stuff in there. And if you are diabetic and store insulin, this is going to be important as well for these medications that do need refrigeration. So with everything we just talked about there, how much power do you actually need? And I think in a situation like this, along with your regular batteries and those little power banks that you have, I think you need an additional 2 kilowatts of power, bare minimum. The more you can get, the better. The longer something like this goes on, the more important these power options are, as well as replenishing that power, which is more important than just having the power banks in the first place. But make sure you have at least a couple kilowatts of extra power that you can store, whether that be the power banks or even just the Life PO4 batteries. And you've also got to think about how you're going to replenish that power. I've got 300 watt solar panels here at the house, and I can generate between 1,000 and 1,500 watt hours of energy per day. So with 3 solar panels, you can see it's pretty difficult to get above 2 or 3 kilowatts of power. If you could put 6, 8, 12 solar panels on your roof and have a really nice setup, that is the long-term goal for me, but that could be your long-term goal. If you've got a whole bunch of money, more money than I have, you can spend $30,000, $40,000 and get a solar setup put in your house and use that to reduce your energy bills and things like that. But you're going to need to be able to replenish that energy that you use on a daily basis. And just because you have 2 or 3 kilowatt hours worth of energy doesn't mean you want to use that all every day. It's just there stored energy if you do need it. And the more you have, the longer it will last. You've also got ways to, if solar is not an option, you've got wind power, hydropower, which aren't as efficient and aren't as widely used as solar power is. But if none of those are an option, you've got generators and fuel storage. And this might be, the best way to go about things, because even though I have solar out here and most of the time I have enough to fulfill my energy needs, if there's a storm or the sun's basically blocked by clouds for 3-4 days, I'd be hosed at that point. So I need to have a generator. And with a generator, you can use that during the day where it's not quite as dangerous or other people are using their generators. And you can use that to refill some of these power banks that you have. So if you have a large 1 or 2 kilowatt power bank, you can charge that with that generator. I've got 2 Life PO4 batteries, so that's basically 2,400 watt hours that I could plug it into the generator and refill that. That way I have that to use during the night and even the next day if I need to. That's completely silent and I don't have to worry about the generator. And when it comes to fuel storage, you've also got to think about the different types of fuels, whether you're talking about diesel fuel for, even vehicles or generators. Some generators take diesel fuel. You've got propane if you are using the buddy heaters. In a situation like that, you can get the adapter for these little 1-pound tanks and hook it up to a 20-pound tank. These 20-pound tanks of propane you may need them for heating with the buddy heater, or you may need them for cooking as well. So it's important to have not just one of those 20-pound tanks of propane, but maybe have a couple extra as well and rotate through those. When it comes to fuel storage, you should have about 25 gallons of fuel stored in 5-gallon jugs, or how much you think you need. But you take these 5-gallon jugs, these 5-gallon jugs, and rotate through those as you use them. If you're going to the gas station to fill up your car, then you just take that first jug, put that in your gas tank, take that jug with you to the gas station and fill that up when you're filling your car up, and then put it at the end of the line when you bring it back home. So you can see when you're talking about a larger situation, it's much more than just the batteries and things like that. It's about the stored energy, and it's about replenishing that energy. When you get to a situation where you're talking longer than a month, even a year or so, it's really hard to say at that point because your energy needs don't go up per month. They stay basically the same. But the situations you're going to be facing and the problems you're going to be facing in that time frame go far beyond how much power you have stored. If you get to a year in a situation where it's an EMP and the grid has been down for a year, like I said in the very beginning, it's a combination of absolute luck and how well you are prepared. Probably 90% luck and 10% preparedness. If you get to that point, you're just going to be happy to be alive at that point. So it's really hard to say, how much energy you're going to need for a year-long situation. If you get to that point, you figured it out. So with that, I just wanted to talk about today what your basic needs are. Go into a little bit more detail about this. When you're talking about just a basic power outage, something that may last a day or two, to something that could be longer term, something that lasts a week or longer, a week, 3 weeks and 3 months and things like that. Those things that you'll want and those things that you'll need in a longer term situation to make sure you have power available for some of these important devices. And as time goes on, you'll figure out alternatives and solutions for maybe some of the things that you can't get power for or don't want to waste that power on. At any rate, if you have any ideas, any thoughts, anything that I didn't cover here, make sure and leave them in the comments below. But until next time, take care and prepare, everyone. We will talk to you all later.